Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. We are live, and I am Kev Baker, and I'm coming to you from Smart City, Glasgow. We're going all the way to Australia, back to Alaska, over to Sid and his mother in Norway, all of our friends in Europe, and then back over to Nebraska. Big shout out to Canada, Belgium, Poland, you name it. Wherever you're from, whenever you're from. Yes, I include time travelers there as well. A big warm welcome to today's Wednesday edition of the Kev Baker Show. And just as promised, I have got Jimmy Jeans here with me. And we're going to be winding back the clock. We're going to be going back in time. And we're going to be taking a look at some ancient mysteries with a difference. We're going to be taking a look at some of the most infamous, some of the most enigmatic documents and manuscripts from throughout history. Some we know something about, some we have absolutely no idea. Can't beat a bit of ancient mystery history woo on a Thursday. So without any further ado, to help me with the woo, it's the man over there in California, Jimmy Jeans. Hang on now. I think this is very apt for today.
Sarcophagi.
You are the sarcophagi guy today, Jimmy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm also the scarf coffee guy right now too, because I have my scarf on and I have my coffee.
Oh, I like that.
But
Scarf coffee guy. I like that, man.
You know, I just want to let you know, don't worry, because I've been here getting ready for the show. I've been doing an ancient smoke ritual, and the smoke has been billowing out of the studio for the last 20 minutes. The ancient smokes have risen to the sky, Kev, and we are now ready to proceed into the ancient domain that you've set aside for the listeners.
So when I say ancient documents, decoded transcripts, what kind of things comes into the mind of Jimmy Jeans before we even launch into today's documents? And Jimmy, I have found some stuff today that I've never even heard of. So this is going to be good. But ancient documents, Jim, what comes to mind?
Well, immediately what comes to my mind right off the bat is the Colburn. You know, the Colburn Bible. They call it the Colburn Bible, but it was never called a Bible. That's what it's called now. But, you know, there's a lot of mystery as far as like where it came from. You know, they were digging something up and they found it inside this encased brick thing. And it, you know, I mean, it's a really, I would say it's a more written for a higher level of intelligence than the Bible is. In other words, the Bible relies a lot on story and parable and all this, whereas, I mean, to explain, you know, what's going on, whereas the Colburn, it has a more technical, sort of higher level feel to it, to me. Where it came from, who wrote it, I don't know. But I find it very interesting and also illuminating in a lot of ways, because when you look at that material, and then if you've looked at other materials before that, or you may find some things subsequent, but it ties into a lot of the other things, you know, the Emerald Tablets, for example. It ties into the idea that there were these priests of the temple that were dispatched across the earth to bring the knowledge, because after, you know, whatever happened, the cataclysmic, you know, whatever happened, and, you know, there were these priests that they sent out, you know, and so you see a lot of this same sort of magical technology and the renderings of people involved with some of these ancient secrets. You know, you know, these things were not just passed around for, you know, any Joe Blow to read down at the barbershop when he's getting a haircut. You know, these were documents that you had to go through intense initiations. You had to prove that you were even worthy to even knock on the door before you could get in the door, before you'd even get an inkling to any of this information. And then you'd have to go through an apprenticeship program, and then you'd have to do another 4 years and before you were a master. And that's just the 4th year. You're just at the 3rd degree. Let's just use the degree system that everyone's familiar with. Let's just say, in order for you to get to the point where you are at the 3rd degree, you literally get the 3rd degree. You take a beating, you go through initiation, you have to learn, you have to go through all this. And a lot of guys, that's where they stop. But some people, they go further. And those are the people that, as they progress through these initiatory processes and they move up one level and up one level to get to the point where, let's just use the 33rd degree level. Imagine what you'd have to go through to get to that level. How many times that the people get sifted out? Okay. You know what I mean? I mean, those people get sifted out, Kev, and they never even get the, they don't get the information because they didn't keep their mouth shut that one time. You're out. You know, you didn't keep that one secret. You told another brother. All right. So, hey, man, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm listening to you there, dude. You know, what Jimmy says is right. You know, you can't just go along to your local library and get a hold of some of these more interesting and important ancient texts. And I would imagine that for every one that we talk about tonight, a known one, there may be ballpark, I don't know, 10, 50, 100 unknown documents that we've never heard of for every one we get into tonight. There may be some ancient manuscripts and documents lying in places like the Smithsonian, the National Museum down in London, where because there's so much stuff that comes in over the years, there's a good chance that there might be something that is absolutely critically important to our story. Something that would definitely be regarded as a document of importance, great significance. And it could just be lying, gathering dust somewhere. Could be under the vault in the Vatican. Maybe somebody, whoever was registering it, whoever was logging it, they didn't know what they were looking at. A lot of these ancient texts were written in languages that maybe people at the time didn't know what they were even dealing with. So always keep that in mind, the ones that we know about, but then there's so many we probably don't know about. And then the ones in the ancient mystery schools that you always hear of, that people, like Jimmy says, when you're initiated into the right clubs, or should I say the right orders, and even then it's not guaranteed you're going to get your hands on all of this stuff. It's not like you definitely get a pass to the library that we don't get. You got to earn it. Really, really earn it. And what really inspired this for me today was when I was listening to another audiobook recently. I say another audiobook on my pre-show stream. I was talking about one I'm listening to now. Earth Core, it's called, where they're drilling for platinum, but there's ancient woo down beneath. But this other book I was listening to, it was kind of like an FBI murder mystery thriller type thing. And it was good, and then all of a sudden, they go to this presentation at a museum, and it's somebody talking about what is known as the Voynich document. Now, I've heard about the Voynich before, we've talked about it on the show before, but this Voynich document, which basically came to public's attention at the early part of the 1900s, we're going to find out more about it in a moment, but this has troubled academics, scholars forever, because this is written in a language like no other. Now, in the fictional book I was listening to, they had a really good twist on it. They kind of made out that it was written by a couple of twins who have made up their own twin language. And twins are known to do this. They'll communicate in their own tongue. And I thought it was a really good take on it, but what it got me thinking about was what is contained within the pages of something like the Voynich, and what other documents are out there that still got a little bit of question mark over them, or we don't quite know what's going on. I thought, well, who better to join me for this little deep dive than Jimmy Jeans. So we're going to be putting our curator's hat on today, Jimmy. We'll be putting our white gloves on, and we'll be touching some ancient manuscripts. Are you looking forward to it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been looking forward to it all week, and I can't wait to get into it because, I mean, I think there's a lot of interconnection that goes on with the knowledge and the unknown knowledge. You know, we talked about it last week, I think it was, that the Bible was never meant to be read by people. That was supposed to be a secret document only for the, you know, higher up than the priest class, you know. And I mean, you're talking about a murder mystery, boy. Look into the actual printing of the first Bible and the whole deciphering and decoding of it by the one man before there ever was a King James Bible. And I mean, literally, it's an unbelievable story, Kev. Someday we should do a show on it for sure. It's literally wild. But let's get into
Yes, and like I said, there's going to be documents today that I'd never heard of. Maybe Jimmy's heard of them, I'm not sure, but one of them's called the Book of Soyga. Not the Book of Soy, but the Book of Soyga. And this relates to John Dee. John Dee comes up a few times today. There's also something called the Rohonc, R-O-H-O-N-K, Rohonc Codex. I've also got something called the Grolier Codex from Mesoamerica. And then the one we're going to start on here is one I've never heard of before, but really caught my eye when I was looking for stuff today. And it's something that's called the Egyptian, or the Ancient Egyptian Handbook of Ritual Power. I've heard of the Ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead and stuff like that, but this is the Handbook of Ritual Power, and it describes love spells and exorcisms. So if we come down here, I'm going to read a bit of this out and I'll get Jimmy's thoughts on it. Jimmy, first up, ever heard of this one before?
No, I have not, and I'm on the edge of my seat.
Nice. Researchers in Australia have deciphered an ancient Egyptian handbook. I'm not going to keep doing the Australian accent, that'd be silly. Revealing a series of invocations and spells. Among other things, the Handbook of Ritual Power, as the book is called, tells readers how to cast love spells, exorcise evil spirits, and treat, quote, something called black jaundice, a sometimes fatal bacteria infection that is still around today. Now, the book is about 1,300 years old and is written in Coptic, an Egyptian language. It is made of bound pages of parchment, a type of book known as a codex. It is a complete 20-page parchment document, codex, containing the handbook of a ritual practitioner, writes Malcolm Choate and Ian Gardner, who are professors at Macquarie University and the University of Sydney, respectively, in A Coptic Handbook of Ritual Power. The ancient book starts with a lengthy series of invocations that culminate with drawings and words of power, they write. They are followed by a number of prescriptions or spells to cure possession by spirits and various ailments, or to bring success in love and in business. For instance, to subjugate somebody, the Codex says, you have to say a magical formula over 2 nails and then drive them into his doorpost, one on the right side and one on the left side. Now, researchers believe that the Codex may date to the 8th or 7th or 8th century, and many Egyptians were Christian during that time. And the Codex contains a number of invocations referring or referencing Jesus. However, some of the invocations seem more associated with a group that flourished in Egypt during the early centuries of Christianity and held Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, in high regard. One invocation in the Codex calls Seth, Seth, the living Christ. Now, the opening of the Codex refers to a divine figure named Bactiotha, just to get that right there, whose identity is a mystery, researchers say. Now, the lines read, I give thanks to you and I call upon you. The Bactiotha, the Great One, who is very trustworthy, the one who is Lord over the 40 and the 9 kinds of serpents, according to the translation. Jimmy, what are we dealing with here? Bactiotha and the one who is Lord over the 40 and 9 kinds of serpents. Oh, the reptilians, man. What's going on here, James?
Sounds like there's some reptiles into the picture. And you know what's even funnier is we were talking about a little bit about Quetzalcoatl before the show, and he comes up riding on a raft made of snakes, and down. So it's interesting, very interesting. Please continue. I'm fascinated.
Okay, so if we get back over to this here. It says the Bactiotha is an ambivalent figure. Choate and Gardner said at a conference before their book on the Codex was published. He is a great power and a ruler of forces in the material realm. Now, historical records indicate that church leaders regarded the Sethians as heretics, and by the 7th century, the Sethians were either extinct or were dying out. Now, the Codex, with its mix of Sethian and Orthodox Christian invocations, may in fact be a transitional document, written before all the Sethian invocations were purged from the magical texts. Now, they noted that there are other texts that are similar to the newly deciphered Codex, but they contain more Orthodox Christian and fewer Sethian features. The identity of the person who used this codex is a mystery, and the user of the codex would not necessarily have been a priest or a monk. It is my sense that there were ritual practitioners outside the ranks of the clergy and the monks, but exactly who they were is shielded from us by the fact that people didn't really want to be labelled as a magician. So, Jimmy, we're almost hearing here then. I mean, we talk about the ancient mystery schools and the elite ruling class at that time. They were the ones that were more kind of privy to the kind of information. We're talking about the magic, the alchemy. But I certainly hadn't really taken much time to think about how, just in today's world, I would imagine royal families still have astrologers and still have alchemists and things. But there's still, like, the working class version of these as well, right? So I'd never thought about that when you think about ancient Egypt and the magicians and all this ancient woo, that there was people like laymen on the ground that were playing about with this stuff as well. Only more of an underground type movement, right? Because they didn't want to be identified, they didn't want to be known. Kind of weird, right? More widespread use of magic than I thought. That's a really good way of putting a long kind of breakdown.
No, I think you're 100% correct on that. And I do, I mean, there is magic that exists, and that the working class people, were privy to. But then there was also this other area where you couldn't go. And those are the areas that you had to ask to come in. And then once you say, can I come in, and you're let in, then you're responsible for that. No one came and said, hey, come and learn these mysteries of the universe. You said, hey, will you teach me the mysteries of the universe, Kev? And you say, well, come on in, Jimmy, and sit right down here and take a look at this. Take a look at this Sethian Codex right here. What do you think about that? Well, I think it's interesting stuff, man. And, like I say, there's a common thread that runs through a lot of this material from all around the world, you know, in and of itself and independent. It seems like its own version of whatever happened, but there seems to be this Christian figure that seems to appear throughout time, throughout history, and throughout different civilizations, and presenting himself in a way that's acceptable to the population that he arrived to. I think it's interesting, you know, maybe he was there all at the same time, simultaneous at the same time all over the world, appearing as Christ in a different format, you know, a format acceptable to the peoples of that land. So the magic part of it, you know, I think there was magic in the story of Jesus Christ himself, wasn't there? I mean, isn't there there's an idea that some people have put forward that he disappeared for those 33 years. Nobody know where he went, you know, but where he went up into learning some of the secrets from the Buddhist temples and different places, Eastern philosophies, Eastern magic, Vedic type Hindu stuff, this, that, and then he came back. You know, he had gained, you know, enlightenment, and then he, you know, achieved illumination, and then he came back, and he was at that point the Christ. After he went through these spiritual pathways, you know, set before him as the son of God, you know, in the form of a man on earth. So you know, when we come in here,
before we get to the break, we're gonna wrap up on this one here, Jimmy. But I'll find a kind of breakdown of this document, and we're not gonna read all of it, but just the introduction of it's quite interesting, to be honest with you. It says Old Coptic Texts of Ritual Power, and it's an introduction by Edmund Meltzer, and it says, throughout the history of the modern academic study of religion and culture, pull up a bit there, as we have noted, the definition of magic in relation to science and religion has been a major problem. At the root of the problem is the loaded, evaluative connotation of magic as false, deceptive, discredited, or morally tainted, contrasted with both science, a correct, enlightened understanding of natural law and causation, and religion, a correct, enlightened understanding of the divine and spiritual. Thus, magic is relegated to the they side of a we-they dichotomy. This is simultaneously unfair to the materials and the practices studied under the heading of magic, and self-serving for the materials, mainly those we identify as our own, and we are exempted from that label. It perpetuates a complacent double standard, a statement by the Egyptologist and historian of religions Herman de Velde in Funerary Mythology aptly epitomizes one aspect of the situation. The distinction between magic and the religion is one of definition. The word magic is often used simply to label actions, sayings and ideas that do not seem reasonable form of, or do not seem reasonable from a Western positivist or Christian point of view. Now we're going to be coming to the break in a moment, but that's something I've noticed over my time doing even alternative media. You know, it's okay to talk about some of the miracles and wonders that are talked about in the Bible, but the minute you start talking about equally wondrous and miraculous things that aren't in the Bible, it's frowned upon. Oh, that's magic, that's taboo. You shouldn't be looking at that, Kev. Oh, you shouldn't have astrologers on your show. What's Bill Bean going to say? What's that all about, folks? What's that all about? A bit of a misunderstanding between the magic and all of that realm and what we deem the religious and the spiritual. Only there is no difference. It's all connected. It's how you look at it. And when we come back on the other side, we're going to be getting into this one here. This is the Rohonc Codex. The Rohonc Codex. Yes, make of that what you will, ladies and gents. We'll be back on the other side, and we'll get our Rohonc on. With our very special guest, Jimmy Jeans is in the house. Jimmy, tell people when they can hear you on YouTube or your radio show next.
Yeah, so we're on Aftermath Media at 6 p.m. Pacific, Thursday nights, right before Clyde Lewis and right after Alex Jones. And I'm over on revolution.radio, freedomslips.com on Friday nights at 11 o'clock Pacific. So come on down for the late night hang. It's usually kind of like a party. I mean, we're still presenting stuff, but I mean, we kind of have a good time. So come on down.
Yes, indeed. Join Jimmy for some of the microcosm madness that unfolds when he goes live.
It does.
It does.
It does, you know.
Yeah. It's an
crazy.
adventure, man. It's an adventure.
And you know what's funny is Rio is our reverse speech expert. And so like, but you know, during the week, something will happen and he'll just find this reverse speech on, I mean, it's crazy, man. So it happens like that. He just goes, hey, well, you know, I found this on Friday night. Next thing you know, it turns into this giant thing about whatever that was. So it's crazy, man. Thanks for asking, Kev. I appreciate it. Indeed. I really love being here, though. I'll tell you that. And this is absolutely one of my most favorite places to be. I don't even like being into the microcosm as much as I like hanging at the Kev Baker show. But into the microcosm is something different, you know. So what can I say? I just enjoy hanging with you, Kev.
Indeed.
You're like, bruh.
Indeed. Well, we're going to continue our deep dive into the coldest of cases when it comes to ancient mysteries and mystery history and ancient woo, and today we're looking at ancient documents, manuscripts, tablets, texts, all the kind of things that have left people puzzled over the years. And the next one I'd never heard of before. Never ever heard of something called the Rohonc Codex. R-O-H-O-N-C. Rohonc. That's what I'm calling it. I don't care how it's pronounced, but we're going to go into it.
I've never heard of it.
No, it says the Rohonc Codex, one of the world's most famous crypto mysteries, appears to have been solved. And yes, I believe this solution is correct. Well, I didn't even know it was a puzzle to begin with, so this is going to be double bubble. The Rohonc Codex is written, or is a handwritten and hand-illustrated book with about 450 pages. It's a unique piece. The special thing about it, the Rohonc Codex is written in a mysterious script. All attempts to decipher the text in the Codex, or to make any sense of it, have failed for at least 150 years. The Rohonc Codex is therefore considered the second most unsolved book cryptogram after the Voynich manuscript. So there's little images of this here. I'm just going to post one over to the good people in the TFR chat room so you can get a little look at what this looks like. It says the Rohonc Codex is, of course, contained in my new outdated, it's a list of cryptograms. It says the Rohonc Codex could undoubtedly be a world-famous, much-discussed crypto mystery if the world-famous, much-discussed Voynich manuscript didn't exist. So, if it wasn't for the Voynich, this would be number one, folks. Earlier this week, I received a mail that informed me about a new article in Cryptologia. And according to this article, the Rohonc Codex has now been solved. And this solution doesn't look like nonsense. Today I'm going to present a frequently asked questions about the Rohonc Codex and recently published solution. In a later post I will address the solution in detail. So, who wrote the Rohonc Codex? The author of the Rohonc is unknown. In contrast to the Voynich manuscript, there is not even much speculation on the subject, so this is even more interesting. there's not a lot of talk about who was behind this one, and that makes me even more interested. So where was the Rohonc Codex created? The Rohonc Codex most likely originates from Central or Eastern Europe. The place origin, or the place of origin, cannot be narrowed down much more precisely. And what do pictures of the Rohonc Codex show? Well, while the illustrations of the Voynich manuscript leave much more room for interpretation, to say the least, the motives of most of the images in the Rohonc Codex can be identified. Almost all of them show scenes from the Bible. For example, Jesus on the cross or Moses on Mount Sinai. What was the purpose of the Rohonc? It's completely unclear what the intended purpose of the Rohonc was. The Christian images suggest a religious use. Perhaps a religious dissenter wanted to hide his heretical doctrine from the church by encryption. On the other hand, the pictures could just be a cover to distract from the actual content of the book. It is also conceivable that the author chose a religious text to demonstrate a writing system he had invented, like Johannes Gutenberg, who demonstrated the printing technology he had invented using a religious text, namely the Bible. After all, it is also possible that someone created the Rohonc Codex just to sell it to a collector for a lot of money. So what are the most important theories about the Rohonc Codex? The text of the Rohonc could be 1. Ordinary text written in a script that is no longer known today. Number 2. An encrypted text. And number 3. A hoax. The same is all true for the Voynich manuscript. It says, where can I find more information on the Rohonc Codex? Now I'm going to dig up more information in just a moment. But Jimmy, what do you make of this? I'd never heard of this at all, man. Never.
No, I definitely have never heard of it either. And the thing about these things is, we're given this, seems like we're just given this bullet pointed view of history that coincides with the powers that be, with their idea of what we should be seeing and what the actual history is, so that we never recognize where we've come from, or our original, tribal tendencies, or any of the things that we're being sort of molded into this idea of something that doesn't really have potential that we would have as natural human beings on the earth, sort of living in these magical principles on a day-to-day basis, just like you were saying earlier. So that magic is a technology. It's not just, when you say the word magic, just like you were saying earlier, what comes into people's mind is, like Houdini for some, black magic to others, Aleister Crowley
and Dee and Parsons and wizards and bad stuff. Usually bad stuff, right? You don't usually think of magic and think of the positive white witches and things like that.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is technology in and of itself has no, it's not good or bad, and so there's a judgment call that happens when some sort of a causation happens by intention. And so your intent and causation and use of energy and what power you're using to call up that energy and how you're directing it is all, is really the context of magic or magic that's being done. And so, there's a lot of different ideas about it, and so a lot of people make judgment calls on it, and so it's hard not to, because most of what people hear is related to what you're talking about. Is most what people hear about is the blood guzzling and and the and all this, the eating of the flesh and all that stuff. But no one really, the other side of it is that maybe that's part of it, and maybe at some point in our human history, tossing someone on the Barbie, you know, on the weekend or whatever for, you know, some of these red-haired giants was no big deal. Like we were talking about last week, man corn, you know, I mean, so, you know, what's considered good or bad today is based on what's considered good or bad today. Because what was good or bad back in the day, based on how society was, you know, assimilated to whatever they were doing. I mean, some places there were, you know, sacrifices and rituals that went on all the time. You know, magic was the way of life, and there was no other thing. It's like we have compartmentalized lives in our modern world, Kev. You know, it's like we got this part over here where we're religious, we got this part over here where we do this, and we got this part over there where we do that. Where when you're living an intentful life, and you're living a life that doesn't revolve around the chasing of money, then every single moment of your day is a spiritual experience that you're relating to everything in the world from that scientific, magical place, Kev. You know what I mean?
I sure do, dude. I sure do. To get into more of the Rohonc, I love the name of it, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Sounds like it should be the name of something you go to the doctor with. Doctor, I've got a severe case of the Rohoncs. I need cream for that. Where'd you catch that? Anyway, the Rohonc Codex is an illustrated manuscript book by an unknown author with a text in an unknown language. And some of the pictures are a bit weird. And writing system surfaced in Hungary in the early 19th century. Now, the book's origin and the meaning of the text and illustrations have been investigated by many scholars and amateurs with no definitive conclusion, though many Hungarian scholars believe it is an 18th century hoax. The name of the codex is often spelled Rohonza or Rohonzia, R-O-H-O-N-C Z-I. According to the old Hungarian orthography, that was reformed in the first half of the 19th century, and this spelling is spread probably due to the book of V. Enakuk? Oh, who knows, some weird name. Today the book is, the name of the codex is written in the Hungarian language. Let's see. Presenting. So it says the codex is 448 pages, each one having between 9 and 14 rows of symbols, which may or may not be letters. Beside the text, there are 87 illustrations that include religious, laic, and military scenes. The crude illustrations seem to indicate an environment where Christian, pagan, and Muslim religions coexist, as the symbol of the cross, the crescent, and the sun, swastika, are all present. Remember, folks, that swastika symbol, don't just think it was the bad guys in World War II. They absolutely bastardized that for their own purposes. Magical purposes. The number of symbols used in the codex is about 10 times higher than any known alphabet. But most symbols are used rarely, so the symbols in the codex might not be an alphabet, but a syllabary. We'll try saying that when you can't talk. Logographs, like Chinese characters. The justification of the right margin would seem to imply that the symbols were written from right to left. Now, study of the paper on which the codex is written shows that it is most probably a Venetian paper made in the 1530s. Now, this does not provide certainty as to the date of the text, however, since it may have been transcribed from an earlier source, or the paper could have been used long after it was produced. There you go. Daco-Romanian.
Yeah.
What do you make of this then, Jim?
That's wild. It reminded me of there's a Celtic saying that says it's a shamanistic saying, if a path has no magic, it's dead. So I just think it's interesting that that at some point society separated the human experience from being one that was in tune with everything and working within the subtle energies to one that was compartmentalized away to where you had to, you know, that your religion and your belief systems were separate from the world that you live in, or you only go there to this place, to this church, or this cathedral to do your worshiping, and it was compartmentalized into that church. I would imagine I'm just here now. It's just coming to me while we're talking. I'm now realizing that these gathering places and these cathedrals and these churches, the reason that they got everybody compartmentalized was because they wanted to sort of conduit that energy. They would bring the mass to the one central location, and then they would be able to suck the energy right out of those people. So maybe that was the reason that powers that be segmented our lives to have work. Your work is not a spiritual practice for you. You know, everything else besides your little area where you're doing your thing, the rest of it, it's nothing to do with spiritual life. And that's maybe where society's gone wrong, Kev, because if everybody realized every single day that they were in, you know, God's country, doing God's work at every single given moment, then, you know, maybe things would be different. I don't know. It's an interesting idea, though, the segmenting. I never really realized it before. Thanks for bringing this document together, man. This is sweet.
Yeah, there's a lot of these ancient documents out there that get you thinking, dude. Really is. I'm going to move on to another one now. This one here, I hadn't heard of this one as well. The Grolier, or the Grolier Codex. Ring a bell with you, Jim?
No.
No. Didn't with me either.
That's 3 for 3. You are 3 for 3.
Looking good, looking good. So it says that this is a Mayan codex of questionable authenticity that appeared on the market in 1971. So let's take it for what it is, folks. Not going to hide that fact. Could be a hoax, I don't know. But it says the Grolier Codex, sometimes known as the Science Codex, consists of 11 fig bark sheets, stuccoed and painted on one side, and are allegedly from a 20-page Mayan book, and the lower portion of the pages is badly water damaged. 8 blank sheets of fig bark paper, all unstuccoed, are associated with the codex, and one of these sheets was carbon dated to AD 1230, plus or minus 130 years. So for some time there has been confusion about the whereabouts of the Grolier Codex, but it is currently known to be housed at the Museo Nacional de Antropología in Mexico City and is not on public display. Now, the Grolier Codex gained international attention when it was displayed at the Grolier Club, New York, in an exhibition entitled Ancient Maya Calligraphy, organized in 1971 by archaeologist Michael Coe. Now, the appearance of the Grolier Codex inspired excitement among archaeologists and epigraphers. The Maya were a literate culture who recorded everything from astronomical observances to dramatic works on accordion-shaped books made from the inner bark of wild fig trees. Now, during the Spanish conquest, these books were interpreted as falsehoods of the devil and were systematically burnt en masse by conquistadors and priests, who then expressed shock that the Maya were traumatized by the destruction. That comes from the Lanka Calderon 1566 that they're kind of quoting there. Prior to the appearance of the Grolier Codex, only 3 Maya codices were known to have survived the conquest. Just think about that, Jimmy. Only 3 documents known to survive all of that. That is heartbreaking, disgusting. just awful. Think of what we lost there, you know?
Yeah, I know. You know, it's the thing about it is if you'll notice, we've talked about it before, how really you don't hear much about Hindus. They're just sort of over there by themselves. You hear about the Abrahamic religions, but you really don't hear much about the Hindus. It's almost dead silence. It's almost like crickets, right? And it's the same thing. You don't hear about this either. You know, you don't hear about these documents that exist that, you know, are pointing towards certain secrets that may or may not have happened. And one of the things that I always find interesting, Kev, and is where I was going with this, is that Spain. You never hear anything about Spain. You don't hear nothing about the secret societies in Spain. You don't hear anything about Spain. Spain's almost dead silent. All you ever heard about Spain was Christopher Columbus and the conquistadors. But when you think about the word conquistadors, that means the conquerors, man. They came in and just decimated everything and burned their libraries to the ground. The libraries that were built up by this snake, the feathered snake god Quetzalcoatl, who rode in on his raft made of snakes, just like that Sethian Christ figure. And I'm starting to see a lot of this Coptic stuff too is really starting to, you know, just like we were talking about with the Ark of the Covenant and all the stuff that's been happening over in that area recently. It's starting to really sort of materialize with some of these documents you brought to the table today, man. Out of the park, bro.
Well, tell the audience, in case people don't know about what's been going on at that little church, Jimmy, with the Ark of the Covenant, in case people haven't heard, you know.
Yeah, so apparently it was where the Ark of the Covenant is supposed to be. It's in Ethiopia, and at this church, and apparently some people tried to attack it. And over a recent period of time, a bunch of people were supposedly killed, 250 people, apparently. I mean, I don't know this to be a fact. I haven't researched it beyond the story that I read. But I just thought it was interesting because I also had bumped into this other story where it was a priest of the same church holding up the oldest representation of the Bible that exists. And I thought it was interesting. I mean, it's just all of a sudden, you know, this area is starting to become a hot spot for a lot of reasons. You know, and, you know, let me point out, too, that some of these codex that we're seeing, some of the symbols and the symbolism, this can be tied into exactly where we're living today in 2021, because let me tell you something, make no mistake about it, that entities are being created as a result of the grenoir of these symbols that are being run on computers, just like people mining Bitcoin. There's people out there running magic over this World Wide Web, ladies and gentlemen. World Wide Web, www is 666. That's right.
Okay, Jimmy, before you get into the weeds totally there now, because I know when you start putting voices on, that's when we're getting close to losing you. So I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to finish this off before we get to the break. But it says here that prior to the appearance of the Grolier Codex, 3 codices were known to have survived. They were transported to Europe in the 16th century as curiosities or souvenirs. And it had long been thought that the fragile nature of the fig bark paper and the wet, acidic soils of Mesoamerica would effectively prevent further codices from being found within archaeological contexts. Now that the Grolier Codex was said to have come from a dry cave, signalled that there was hope that new codices might yet be found in situ, as opposed to in a European library. However, inquiries into both the provenance and provenience of the Grolier Codex produced surprising results. So the archaeologist Co was told by an unnamed friend that a Mexican collector named Dr. Jose Sáenz had purchased what appeared to be a real Mayan Codex or Maya Codex in 1966. Coe travelled to Mexico City to have a look and was reasonably convinced that the document was not a forgery, and asked Sáenz how the object came into his possession. So Sáenz related that an unnamed person told him, perhaps in person, although some accounts state that he received a series of phone calls, that if he was willing to fly to a remote airstrip and not ask any questions, he would be shown some recently unearthed Maya treasures. Sáenz got in a light plane with two men, and although the plane's compass was covered with a cloth, he was familiar with the area and stated that they landed on a remote airstrip in the foothills of the Sierra de Chiapas. So Sáenz was shown the codex and other objects which the looters said were found together in a dry cave, the location of which was not revealed. Now he was told he could take the objects to Mexico City to have them authenticated before he bought them. Sáenz said his expert denounced the items as fake, but that he bought them anyway. Coe obtained permission from Sáenz to display the codex in his upcoming Grolier Club exhibition, and it is from that that the document earned its name. So we're almost on the end of the first hour, folks. Come back after the break. We've still got a lot more to come. We've got the Voynich. Oh yes, indeedy, the Voynich, the most famous of all. But we've also got more to come right here on the Kev Baker Show. We'll be right back. Hour number 2 with Jimmy Jeans today. We're blowing off the cobwebs of all these ancient documents and manuscripts and transcripts and cryptograms and all the rest of it that we're looking at today. Having fun, Jim?
I am. You know, I was about to perform another smoke ritual over here and let the ancient smokes rise up out of my peace pipe with good intentions for everyone, including all.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I can't think of a better way to start hour number 2.
There you go.
So let's get back over here. We're talking about the Grolier, or the Grolier Codex. So this archaeologist Coe reveals little about Dr. Sáenz, and the story related by Coe in his 1992 volume strikes many as far-fetched. Indeed, Coe had previously been shy about sharing his tale. In his 1973 catalogue of the exhibition that included the Grolier Codex, its owner is listed accurately as, or inaccurately as, collection, private collection, New York. When contacted by Carl E. Meyer in 1973, Coe would only say that the codex was a real hot potato lent to the Grolier Club by an anonymous owner, and would say no more on the matter. The Grolier Codex was eventually donated to the Mexican government, although the timing and the circumstances of the donation are unclear. The fantastical nature of the story offered by Sáenz and the document's unusual iconographic features have caused some scholars to question the authenticity of the codex. Now, over the years, numerous forged Maya codices have appeared on the market, but these have been easily dismissed as fakes based on either the construction of the paper, an apparent lack of knowledge of Maya hieroglyphs, or clear plagiarism from the 3 surviving codices. Analysis of the Grolier Codex was not so simple. The paper of the codex appears authentic, the inscriptions are numeric and not textual, and the contents are not lifted directly from any known codices. Maya archaeologist Jai E. S. Thompson says one of the strangest critics, or he is one of the strongest critics of the Grolier Codex, called attention to a variety of iconographic Anar anachronisms. Wow. Iconographic anachronism. And a curious lack of certain predictive data within the document. Now, Bodez, following Thompson, has argued that the main flaw with the codex is its futility. He argues that Maya codices were used to inform readers about predictive omens associated with various dates. Now, that's a bit kind of bit off, because Jimmy, they're saying here that, like, he argues that the codices were always about, like, omens about various dates. Considering we're told that only 3 survived, who knows what some of the codices could have been about, right?
Yeah, it makes no sense. And the thing about it is, too, is we don't even know how many of these were, like, whisked away.
Oh, I was going to say that to you earlier, Jimmy, right? I mean, these boats, when they're taking back the gold and all the antiques and all the kind of plunder, because let's make no mistake about it, you can call them the Spanish Armada, the conquistadors. They were pirates. They were government-sanctioned pirates and invaders. That's what they are. They're just pirates flying under a national banner. That's all these people are, Jimmy. So I would imagine, right? I would imagine, dude, sorry, but just to finish off, I would imagine, I'm not buying that they destroyed all of them. I'm not buying that they even destroyed the majority of them. That, to me, would have been as valuable to the elite class that were funding these kind of, the voyages over there. They would have wanted that. That would have been high on the list, right up there with the gold. We want the knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm. Just like Baghdad in the Iraq War, same kind of thing. Hey, maybe it's the same pirates coming in there. Do the same thing. And you know what's funny too, is they come in there and all of a sudden they come in and they lop a bunch of heads, and all of a sudden you start hearing all this. All of a sudden, Christopher Columbus, the conquistadors, this whole thing. I think I'm under the impression that Christopher Columbus was a corporation, and that there was a bunch of things that happened under the name Christopher Columbus, but it wasn't just one dude. You know, same thing. It was a whole bunch of people that were, you know, put out there by these elite families. And the same thing with, for example, Shakespeare from a sociological and an engineering standpoint. Shakespeare was more like a corporation with a bunch of different people putting things together under the name Shakespeare, that type of thing. So, you know, we're so lost without some sort of a cohesive representation of all these ancient documents that somebody, you know, they have enough time to sit there and do these studies on all these different things, but they don't have enough time to sit there and put all this stuff together and come up with a cohesive history of planet Earth based on everything that they have, you know. But they're figuring out how to go to Mars, though, Kev. You know, getting ready to go to Mars, you know. But hey, don't worry about the history of the Earth. I mean, maybe the actual history of the Earth tells us what happened to Mars. You never know, right, Kev?
You never know. You just never know. And you mentioned Shakespeare there. When I was in 36, that was based in Nuneaton, which is a stone's throw from Stratford upon Avon. Shakespeare land down there. Everywhere you go, it's like Shakespeare-themed pubs and all that kind of thing. But yeah, Shakespeare a character? Probably not. Pen name? Absolutely. Who for? Well, that's another show waiting to happen.
Yeah, man. Seriously. I mean, but you know, it's interesting that but you see these main characters, but these are the pop culture characters, and this is a pop culture history that we're living under, right? The history is presented to us just like pop culture. It's, you know, it's got a storyline to it. It all sort of makes...
We all like a storyline, Jimmy. Come on now. We all like a storyline. And ZX, my good friend out there, he says, bloody Nuneaton, know it well. Oh, dude, Nuneaton, stunning Nuneaton. I would go back there in a minute, man. All those Shakespearean ladies, I'm telling you.
Oh, yeah, man. And hey, you got that document from earlier. You can do some love spells.
Exactly, dude. You can't beat a bit of love spelling, especially on a Wednesday night. Let's get back into this, Jimmy. Let's get back at if we go back to this one we were on, let me dig it up again here. Now there was an update done on it in 2016, some new information. But it says a group of noted Maya scholars, including Michael Coe, released a review of the accumulated evidence regarding the authenticity of the Codex and supplementing it with their own analysis. Is number one, objections about the calendrics in the Codex can be explained by an accepted alternative function of Maya codices and regional or temporal variations in the mythology of Venus. Sharp cuts on the Codex do not indicate modern tools, but rather breaks in the gypsum plaster that were used to prepare the surface of the document. The process through which the figures on the Codex were placed conforms to the use of sketch and grid lines seen in Maya murals. Radiocarbon dating places the Codex at AD 1257, plus or minus 110 years, and 1212, plus or minus 40 years. Although this is the date of the paper, not the images. No modern pigments can be found on the Codex, including in the portions rendered in the difficult to produce Maya blue. And the other items that have been found with the Codex have been shown to be authentic. Ultimately, after an analysis of the nuance of the depictions of deities in the Codex, they ask the question, could the painter of the Grolier have lived in the 20th century? And based on the evidence they collect, they answer it with a no. So we'll keep our minds open on that one, but we're going to go to one next that really, I've not dug into it, I just found the name of it, I've seen who it was related to, and that's why I've kind of saved it, so we can get an initial reaction together. But any final thoughts on this one before we move on, Jim?
I just wanted to bring up, because we were talking about a particular a depiction, a Mayan depiction of the guy who appears to be operating some sort of a piece of technology. It seems like he's sitting in a rocket or something.
Aztec.
You know, was that Aztecs?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, see, I mean, that's the kind of information that, you know, existed in these civilizations. And you know, you can be sure, just like when the Skull and Bones went into Iraq to get that, you know, Stargate material that old Saddam Hussein had found. Same gang, man. And you know what? I'm excited. This has been a fantastic, really a learning opportunity, and I just welcome this information so much. These are the doorstops to the pop culture history that we've been fed. These kind of documents. There's no reason to disbelieve any document at this point.
It's the Maya. You were right the first time. It's the Maya, the astronaut of Palenque.
Yeah, man. Yeah. See what I mean? I mean, even if it was Aztec, it doesn't, you know, it's the same. See, there's these beings that just showed up somewhere, and all of a sudden there was this, you know, stair-step evolution happening. You know, it was flatline until these dudes showed up, these light-skinned, red-haired peoples showed up in specific areas around the world, and, you know, all of a sudden, stuff happened. Agriculture, science, astronomy, all these things, you know, and there it is, you know. This culture right here had a figure that was just like, you know, people you know, equate to the Christ figure. There Indeed. Was a Christ for these people.
Indeed, Jim. Indeed. So we're gonna move on to our next one now, though, dude, because we're running out of time rapidly. But the next one, it's to do with John Dee. Yes, John Dee. Now there's a character, there's a name. We're going to take a look at him, but the actual document in question, something called the Book of Soyga. Ever heard of this one, Jim?
No, I haven't.
No.
But It almost sounds like something that you would make fun of something. Hey, where'd you get that in the book of Soyga?
Yeah. Well, the Book of Soyga, also titled Aldar Aia, is a 16th century Latin treatise on magic, one copy of which was owned by the Elizabethan scholar John Dee. Now, after Dee's passing, the book was thought lost until 1994, when two manuscripts were located in the British Library and the Bodleian Library. See, that's what I'm talking about, folks. They're just lying around. People don't know what's lying in there because there's so much lying around in there. So it says under the title Aldarea Saive Soyga Vokor by D scholar Deborah Harkness. Now, the Sloan Manuscript 8 version is also described as Tractatus Astrologica Magicus, though both versions differ only slightly. So it says here the contents. Jim Reed's notes that the Bodley 908 MS consists of 197 pages, including Liber Aldarea, 95 leaves, and Liber Radiorum, and that's 65 pages, and Liber Decimus Septimus, 2 pages, as well as a number of shorter and unnamed works, totaling approximately 10 pages. Now, the final 18 pages of the manuscript contain 36 tables of letters. The Sloan MS-8 manuscript consists of 147 pages, mostly identical to the Bodley manuscript, with the exception that the tables of letters appear on 36 pages, and the Liber Radiorum is presented in a 2-page summarized version. Now, among the incantations and instructions on magic, astrology, demonology, lists of conjunctions, lunar mansions, and names and genealogies of angels, the book contains 36 large squares of letters, which Dee was unable to decipher. Otherwise unknown medieval magic treatises are cited, including works known as Liber E, Liber Os, Liber Dignus, Liber Sipal, and Liber Manub, or Munob. That's an interesting word, Munob. So, analysis. Jim reads, in his short work, John Dee and the Magical Tablets in the Book of Soyga, which also appeared abbreviated in an essay, notes a proclivity to record words backwards. Oh, Jimmy. Backwards writing, backwards words. Citing an example as lapis, reversed as sipal, bonum, reversed as manob, and the title of the MS Soyga as Aegios Litris Transvectus, revealing a practice which sought to obscure some of the works cited. Soyga is algios, Greek for holy, spelled backwards. Jimmy's absolutely ready to fall off the chair here. Wait a minute, Jim, and I'll let you unleash on this, right? The Book of Soyga, or the Book of Soyga's preoccupation with letters, alphabet, arithmetic, Hebrew-like backwards writing, and so on, is of course characteristic of the new Kabbalistic magic, which became popular in the 16th century, exemplified by the great compilation of Agrippa of Nettesheim, and borrowing authority both from the Renaissance humanist interest in the Kabbalah, expressed by such figures as Pico and Reuchlin, and from the supposed biblical antiquity of the Kabbalah. Of the square tables that obsess Dee, Reed continues, quote, although not themselves a characteristic feature of traditional Kabbalah, they had by Agrippa's time become an integral part of Christian magical Kabbalah. So, Jimmy, little did you know we were going to be talking about John Dee and getting into backwards writing, dude. You talk about backwards speech with Rio all the time. What's going on here then, Jim? What's in your mind now?
Well, I mean, it's clear, it's clear about, especially as far as the English language is concerned, it's clear that, the English language goes backwards and forwards. And so anybody who's worth their salt, who's gone through an initiatory process, should be able to speak and read forwards and backwards as fluently as they do in whatever language it is that they speak. So that's the interesting thing, too, is a lot of times when people are looking for reverse speech, they're looking for English. But a lot of times there's a lot, like we've discovered, there's quite a bit of Russian in reverse, especially in some of the political figures. I'm not going to mention any names, but this has been a fantastic show. And I got to say, in what you were reading there and the conversation about John Dee and kind of magic that was going on, it reminded me of of something called the Triangular Book of St Germain. And it was rumored that Manly P. Hall was the keeper of only one of 3 of these documents. And so since we're talking about ancient documents, maybe on the other side of the break we can talk a little bit about the Triangular Book of St Germain and all.
Muted up. Sorry, man. Sorry. Sounds good to me, dude. Sounds good. Let me go
I'll
back to a little bit of John Dee, and then after the break we'll get into that one. In 1556, Dee proposed the founding of a national English library to Queen Mary, but his plan was not implemented. In consequence, Dee amassed the largest library in England at the time, using his personal funds, consisting of at least 3,000 printed volumes and a large number of manuscripts. The library was pilfered during Dee's 6-year trip to the continental Europe between 1583 and 1589, and Dee was forced to sell many more volumes upon his return due to penury. After his passing in 1608 or 1609, the still considerable remnants of the vaunted library were ransacked until nothing remained. During Dee's long trip to the continent, he sought to supernaturally contact angels through the services of a scryer called Edward Kelly. On the subject of the Book of Soyga, Dee claimed to have questioned the angel Uriel about the significance of the book and asked for guidance. Now, the reply that Dee received was that the book had been revealed to Adam in paradise by the angels and could only be interpreted by the archangel Michael. After Harkness rediscovered the 2 copies of the book, Jim Reeds uncovered the mathematical formula used to construct the tables, starting with a seed word given for each table, and identified errors of various types made by the manuscript's scribes. He showed that a subset of the errors were common to 2 copies, suggesting that they were derived from a common ancestor which contained that subset of errors, and thus was presumably itself a copy of another work. Now, although Reeds deciphered the construction algorithm and the code word used in crafting the tables, the actual contents and significance of the tables remain mysterious. He writes the treatise or the treatise in the Book of Soyga, which discuss the tables, Liber Radiorum, has a series of paragraphs mentioning the code words for 23 on the tables together with number sequence which stand in unknown relation to the words. That's absolutely fascinating, and John Dee Well, there's a very, very fascinating guy indeed, right?
You know, when we imagine, you know, when we imagine something like angels, we imagine angels speaking. We obviously are going to think of them talking like we talk, but there, you know, there's an idea that angels didn't speak words; they spoke sounds, and what they speak and the sounds and the frequency and the resonance of that when it hits the individual, it's the idea of whatever it was, you know, happens in a person's mind, but that angels only made noises and hit notes or frequencies when they spoke. Maybe some of this table here is some of the idea of what some of the frequencies were that they were using to transmit the message from heaven to God. But it's an interesting idea that this document was passed over to Adam, because maybe is this the idea of knowledge? Is this when knowledge potentially got passed over to Adam with this ancient document that you found, Kev? Wow.
Very cool stuff. I knew this was going to be an interesting show because it's a good topic to get into, but I didn't really appreciate just how good it could be. We're going to come back on the other side. We're going to look at my most famous, my favourite one, the Voynich. But we're also going to get into that one that Jimmy mentioned as well. The triangular book of St Germain. And don't forget, coming up right after today's show, we've got Lucky with Quantum Connections right here on tfrlive.com. And don't forget, I go live most days before the show. I was live over on YouTube today. We were taking a look at a time-traveling train. Yep, this was like the Philadelphia experiment. A disappearing train in the early 1900s. And then get this. It was seen potentially 400 years before in South America. Oh, go figure. That's the kind of woo that we do on the pre-show. We were also talking about Egypt and the potential for there being all this uncovered history. All these layers, like pages in a book. Like the books that we're talking about tonight. The books that take us back in time. But not only back in time, because they unlock the future as well. There's nothing new under the sun, folks. We don't have to find out anything new. We just have to remember what we've already forgotten. We'll be back after the break. Don't go anywhere. Jimmy, have you had fun so far? I need to clear my back of my throat. So
yeah,
I'm having fun.
I am. I'm having a fantastic time. You know, it's nothing better than having a good time and then learning something at the same time. So I mean, I'm super stoked. I'd never heard any of these documents, and it's just, you know, like I said earlier, it's more it's a doorstop on the pop culture history that we've been fed, corn fed. You know, we've been corn-fed and gotten fat off of this, you know, minor representation of human potentiality and the abilities of our species to develop civilizations that don't look anything like the one that we're in right now. That has nothing to do with profit and everything to do with cooperation. And I mean, living in cooperation with everything natural and each other. And so, you know, when you take profit out of the equation, all kinds of things happen that are really great in society, because then people have like I said earlier, have the ability to realize that everything that they do is a religious experience.
Indeed,
you know?
Indeed. So let's move on, right? Because my number one that really inspired this, like I said today, and it's something that's always kind of head scratcher. It's the Voynich document. So we're going to get into that. Then we're going to get into Jimmy's triangular book of St Germain. But the Voynich, I would imagine a lot of you out there have probably heard of this one. If not, hold on tight. This is very, very weird and woo. But it says here, it says the Voynich manuscript, a general introduction. This comes from Voynich.nu. And in 1639, the Prague citizen Georgius Bartius wrote a letter to the Jesuit Athanasius Kircher in Rome, which included the above lines. Now, there was like Roman written above there, Latin. I'm not going to try and read that out, it'd be pointless. He explained that he owned a mysterious book that was written in an unknown script and that was profusely illustrated with pictures of plants, stars, and chemical secrets. It says Bartius said that he could not read the text and that he hoped Kircher would be able to translate this book for him. Now, as far as we can tell, Kircher did not succeed in this. The book later passed through various hands and ended up in the Voynich Rare Books and Manuscript Library of Yale University. It is now known as the Voynich Manuscript, and it is a medieval handwritten book of almost 250 pages, and even today the text cannot be understood. It has become quite famous and is recognized as one of the main unsolved problems in the history of cryptography. While nobody has been able to find an explanation for the text, the book just seems to be waiting for somebody to achieve this. In fact, there are plenty of people who believe that they have done this. Many new translations of parts of the manuscript, individual pages, or even individual words are proposed each year. The problem is that none of these is sufficiently convincing to be accepted. The book is preserved at the Voynich Library since 1969, where it is officially known as Manuscript 408, but is better known by its nickname. It was named after Wilfrid Voynich, an antiquarian book dealer who bought it or brought it to light in 1912. We may use his words to describe this event, although we have to keep in mind that not all of his statements are necessarily reflecting the truth. This is because he bought the manuscript under the condition of absolute secrecy about details of the sale. In 1912, I came across the most remarkable collection of preciously illuminating manuscripts. For many decades, these volumes had lain buried in the chests in which I found them in an ancient castle in southern Europe. While examining the manuscripts with a view to the acquisition of at least a part of the collection, my attention was especially drawn by one volume. It was such an ugly duckling compared with the other manuscripts, with their rich decorations in gold and colours, that my interest was aroused at once. I found that it was written entirely in cipher. Even a necessarily brief examination of the vellum upon which it was written, in calligraphy, the drawings and the pigments suggested to me, as the date of its origin, the latter part of the 13th century. The drawings indicated it to be an encyclopedic work of natural philosophy. The fact that this was a 13th century manuscript in cipher convinced me that it must be a work of exceptional importance, and to my knowledge the existence of a manuscript of such an early date written entirely in cipher was unknown, so I included it among the manuscripts which I purchased from this collection. Two problems presented themselves. The text must be unravelled and the history of the manuscript must be traced. It was not until some time after the manuscript came into my hands that I read the document bearing the date 1665 or 1666, which was attached to the front cover. This document, which is a letter from Johannes Marcus Marci to Athanasius Kircher, making a gift of the manuscript to him, is of great significance. Now, the Prague physician and scientist Johannes Marcus Marci had been a faithful correspondent of Kircher for 25 years. Sometime before his passing, he sent the manuscript to Kircher. The manuscript was accompanied by the letter mentioned by Voynich, in which Marcy explains how he had inherited the manuscript from a close friend, who had tried to decipher it until the end of his life, and had also asked for Kircher's help. This friend was Georgius Bartius, whose letter was cited above. Now Voynich took the manuscript to London in 1912, and later, January 1915, to the United States. He always called it cipher MS, and occasionally he provided photographic copies of pages of it to experts in various disciplines. The manuscript became famous when, in the 1920s, William Romain Newbold proposed a spectacular partial translation of its text. This solution was disproved by John M. Manley in 1931. Now, the manuscript has attracted the attention of code-breaking experts ever since 1917, and in the 1940s and the 1960s, the eminent cryptanalysts William F. Friedman and Elizabeth Smith Friedman, made several valiant attempts at deciphering its text. They were aided by groups of code-breaking experts, but also they did not find any solution. So in 1961, the book was bought by the famous antiquarian H.P. Krauss for the sum of $24,000. He tried to sell it for $160,000, but was unable to find a buyer. Finally, in 1969, he donated it to the Rare Book and Library of Yale University. In 2009, one of the many questions surrounding the manuscript could be resolved. The parchment of the manuscript was radiocarbon dated, resulting in a date range of 1404 to 1438. And that's with a 95% confidence. So it talks about, Jimmy, how the Voynich is a parchment codex of 22.5 times 16 centimeters, with its leaves numbered up to 116, of which 14 are now missing. Its cover, also parchment, is blank. It does not indicate any title or author, and the manuscript is written in an elegant but otherwise unknown script. Wonder what it says about the pages that are missing, Jimmy. Who took the 14 pages away of a manuscript we can't... Could they contain the code, the Rosetta Stone that you need to decode the rest, maybe?
They very well could. And, you know, the times that we're living in, too, Kev, is that if you put an AGI on some of these systems... because they've got AGI that can observe a game until it figures out the rules. So I think a lot of these symbols that we're seeing, I think there's more to these that meet the eye than, because, we talked about on your show before Falconelli, and Falconelli is somebody who really works in the language of the green light, which is the language of the birds, which is the phonetic Kabbalah, and that's CABA, not K. The Kabbalah, the phonetic Kabbalah, and the secret behind the structure of sentences and paragraphs, to where the person who's in the know sees a different paragraph than you and I see, because they're reading it in a way and in a language that we don't understand. In the same way that these symbols are put forward in these books in languages that we don't understand. And these same codes exist, and maybe these are the missing pages. There's nothing to say that this document shouldn't be taken totally seriously. And from everything we're seeing here.
From what I know, John Dee had his hands on this at one point. From what I know, he tried to decode it at one point. But a lot of people have had their hands on it,
always think back to that movie Contact when they get this radio signal or whatever and they're looking at it and there just comes this moment of clarity and realization, Kev, where they go, wait a minute, this is a 3D document. And I think, you know, as we get further on down the road with our ability and our computational abilities, we're going to find out that literally the codes to the fabric of the universe can be found in these symbols. These symbols weren't left in the way that they were left, you know, just because people felt like painting on a wall one day.
Yeah, I mean, MIT and Yale and Harvard, I think, they're all working on not AGI, not general intelligence, just a really specific AI that's been trained in cryptography. It's got data sets that show it all old languages. And I know people, they shake their head and they think I'm mad for believing AI can do anything. But in this particular field, this specific kind of area, when it's looking for patterns, that's one of the key things in cryptography for humans. You look for repeating patterns. That can be the giveaway of repeating letters, and that then gives them the kind of the aha moment that Jimmy's talking about. And like Jimmy says, when it comes to text and numbers, it might sound weird, but there is a kind of interdimensionality to it if it's encoded into it. Maybe we can't see it. Maybe we've got no concept of what these people were trying to do or some of the techniques they were using. But then it might take an AI that recognizes an obscure paper from one corner of the world and then puts it together with a couple of other obscure papers that without that nobody would ever have put two and two together out of the bajillions of papers out there. And guess what it starts to see? It starts to find the pattern. The patterns, those hidden patterns, and that is absolutely critical to decoding anything in human form, let alone letting the AI do it. And remember, folks, the AI, it only really does a good job of copying what we do ourselves. So if we come back down to here, this is really interesting too, Jimmy, and then we'll move on to your one. It says the text written from left to right appears to be arranged in short paragraphs, and the manuscript is profusely illustrated. And from these illustrations, it appears to be a scientific or medical work from the Middle Ages. Illustrations of similar type are mostly grouped together in the manuscript, and one may tentatively identify the following sections based on the illustrations. A herbal section, with drawings of herbs, some of which look realistic, while others appear imaginary. Well, are they imaginary, or are they maybe things that don't exist anymore? You see what I'm saying? An astronomical section with illustrations of sun, moon, stars, and zodiac symbols. A cosmological section with mostly circular drawings, because everything's cyclical. A so-called biological section, which contains some possibly anatomical drawings with small human, mostly feminine figures, populating systems of tubes, transporting liquids.
Whoa.
Exactly, a pharmaceutical section, so called because of its drawings of containers, next to which various small parts of herbs, leaves and roots have been aligned. And a recipe section which contains over 300 short paragraphs, each accompanied by a star in the left margin. So, well, let me just, we're almost there, Jim. It says here, the text of the manuscript is still a mystery. It is tempting to assume that the text relates to the illustrations, but this is not certain. There have been many suggestions about the historical importance of the Voynich, ranging between opposite extremes, including early discoveries and inventions by the 13th century friar Roger Bacon, written in a very complicated code, nonsense written by a medieval quack to impress his clientele, a rare prayer book from the Cathars, not destroyed by the Inquisition, written in pidgin version of Germanic, Romance, Creole, or a meaningless strings of characters cleverly composed by John Dee and or his associate Edward Kelly for monetary gain. There
well,
you go,
you know,
dude. You like it? I'm liking it.
I do, but you know what immediately caught my eye was the pigeon, because that's exactly what the phonetic Kabbalah is all about, is these different parts of words that rhyme with other parts of words that are numerically separated by a code that you've been taught. And you can read it like you can read the, you know, the lines on my face. But you know, the triangular book, you have to
let's get to the triangular book. Tell us, man.
No, I want you. I sent you this thing there. I want you to learn about it right now, because I want to hear your voice when you hear this, because this is really, it fits in so perfectly. We may have to come back and just do a little bit more on this, because we don't have that much time. But go ahead and let it rip, man, because this book is really interesting, because the way I found out about it, Kev, was that there was an idea that Manly P. Hall had one of these books, and when that he passed away, that he gave it to Jordan Maxwell, and there was a fire and it got burned up.
Okay.
And I asked Jordan Maxwell personally. I was talking to him. I asked him on a show, you know, specifically about this book. He said he did not have it, and no, Manly P. Hall did not give it to him. But he said that Manly P. Hall did have one of these, or he thought that he did.
Okay.
And so there was only 3 existing copies in the world, apparently. So we don't know for sure, but here it is. I mean, there it is. Let it rip, man.
The Triangular Book of St Germain, or the Triangular Manuscript, is an untitled 18th century French text written in code and attributed to legendary Count of St Germain. It takes its name from its physical shape. The binding and sheets of vellum that comprise the manuscript are in the shape of an equilateral triangle. The text, once deciphered, details a magical operation through which a person can perform feats of magic, notably the discovery of treasure and extension of life. So the manuscript begins with a short Latin inscription mentioning that this is a gift given by Count of St Germain, followed by an illustration of a winged dragon. All of the text beyond this point, including the inscriptions belonging to the diagrams, is in cipher. Now, the book describes a ritual aimed at achieving one of 3 goals: discovering the location of valuable objects, and that's goal 1 and 2, and life extension, goal 3. The former requires performing the ritual during a full solar eclipse. The latter can be performed at any time, but it requires wearing a specific longevity amulet, which the manuscript then refers to in a diagram. Although this text is part of Manly Hall collection of alchemical manuscripts, it does not contain any of the usual alchemical content. It was likely meant to stand on its own and was only combined with other manuscripts post-acquisition by the Getty Research Institute. It says the 2 known copies of the triangular manuscript exist as Hogarth Manuscript 209 and 210. Both currently reside in the Getty Research Institute collection, and MS 209, dated 1775, was made for Antoine Louis Moret, a French Freemason who emigrated to the United States in the 18th century. At one point it resided in the library of Jules C.G. Favre, a French politician, and Pliny E. Chase, an American mathematician with an interest in cryptography, makes mention of it in a lecture to the American Philosophical Society on October the 3rd, 1873, stating that the manuscript was, quote, purchased in Amsterdam about 70 years ago, around 1803. It is unclear if he owned the manuscript, examined it, or had simply heard of its existence. And French bibliographer, poet, and Rosicrucian Stanislas de Gotia, had it in his library for some time. From there, It was passed on to a certain Madame Barbe of Paris, and then to Frank Hollings, a 20th century London writer and antiquary. And after 1934, Hollings sold it to Manly P. Hall. Much less is known about the other manuscript. Goes on to say here, one of the most peculiar properties of the manuscript is its physical shape. An equilateral triangle, measuring approximately 23.7 centimeters across each of its 3 sides. It is elegantly bound in leather and gilded on the front. In European grimoire tradition, one frequently finds the practice of conjuring spirits into a triangle drawn on the ground. And this particular shape, fortified by the divine names written around it, was thought to force a spirit to answer honestly and perform its duties without tarrying. Hey, I tell you, far more innocent times back then. By making the manuscript in triangular form, the author may have intended to emphasize the book's spiritual nature, Jim.
Hey, maybe those celebrities throwing up that triangle, maybe it means something else that people thought it meant. Maybe that triangle has to do with that triangle book and the riches and all this. You know, you never know. They're just throwing up that triangle. Maybe that triangle is the you can make that happen. Well, that's the you know, the time capsule right there. You can make the ancient ones pop right out. What do you think about that?
I think we're almost out of time, dude.
Wow. You can't be kidding. But, you know, the thing about it is, Kev, this has been great. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot tonight. And thanks for throwing that triangular book in there. That was great too, man.
Yeah, this has been definitely an interesting one. I like the documents. That was a good one. Right, we'll need to come on and do old maps maybe next time.
What's happening tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night's Thursday night. Nothing. Scotty, my usual.
Nice.
Yep. I think it's Scotty. I think it's Scotty tomorrow night. Is Thursday tomorrow? Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yes. Blur's Day. It's Blur's Day in the year.
And we'll get you back next week at some point, and we'll get into some other craziness, man.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. There's so much to get into. I mean, there's
plug your YouTube then before we go.
Into the Microcosm with Jimmy Jean Strike Zone. We're going to be doing some live recording a little bit later tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific. Come on down if you want to hang out in the chat room while we're doing some fun stuff. We're going to be doing some satire.
Send me some positive vibes, folks. I am absolutely I'm under the gun with toothache right now. I made it through 2 hours, Jim. I don't know how I done it. I can barely think.
Get out of here and get yourself some good, you know, I don't know, peppermint tea is always good, but I don't know, old number 7 is always good for being ailing a brother with his tooth. That's all I know. Old number 7 is always there for, you no matter rain or shine.
It needs something, I'm telling you. A hammer, maybe. Yeah. Folks, I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, wherever you are. Make it TFR. Then touch that dial.